Willow Lane had survived storms, blackouts, and even fire, but it had never survived a night where no one slept. That night began quietly, too quietly. No sirens, no barking dogs, no wind through the trees, just a stillness that felt intentional, as if the street itself was listening. The first person to notice something wrong was Elliot Grange. Elliot lived at number 4, a narrow brick house with a porch that creaked no matter how often he fixed it. He worked night shifts at the regional hospital and came home just before midnight. He noticed Willow Lane was fully lit. Every porch light, every living room lamp, every upstairs bedroom glow, all on at once. That alone wasn't strange. Storms sometimes caused power surges, but there was no storm, and every light was the same color, the same intensity, no flicker, no variation. It looked rehearsed. Elliot parked his car and stayed inside longer than usual, hands resting on the steering wheel. When he checked his phone, he realized something else. No signal. No bars, no Wi-Fi. His watch said 11:43 p.m. It stayed that way. Across the street, Naomi Keller was already awake. Naomi suffered from chronic insomnia. Most nights she slept in fragments, 10 minutes here, 20 there. She knew the sound of Willow Lane better than anyone. Tonight, the lane sounded padded, as if something had been placed over the world. She noticed it when the refrigerator hum stopped, when the ticking wall clock froze mid-second. She stood and walked to the window. That's when she saw every neighbor standing at their own window, staring out, not moving, not waving, just standing. Their faces were softly lit from below, like candlelight at a vigil. Naomi raised her hand. No one responded. At exactly 12 a.m., the streetlights went out. All of them, at once. But the houses stayed lit, light without a source. That's when the first sound came. Footsteps. Not on the sidewalk, inside the houses. Slow, measured, unhurried. Naomi backed away from the window. Her phone vibrated. A notification from the neighborhood group chat, Willow Lane Watch. Mrs. Calder. Is anyone else awake? Elliot. Yes. What's happening? Unknown. Don't turn the lights off. The message didn't have a name, just a gray icon. Before anyone could reply, another message appeared. Unknown. It notices darkness. By 12:11 a.m., everyone on Willow Lane was awake. No alarms had gone off, no knocks at the door. They just woke up. Parents found children sitting upright in bed, eyes open, calm. Pets refused to move, pressed low to the floor, trembling. No one felt sleepy. No one felt tired. It was like the concept of sleep had been temporarily removed. At number 11, Mrs. Calder stood in her kitchen holding a glass of water she hadn't realized she poured. She had lived on Willow Lane for 43 years. She knew this feeling. She whispered to the empty room, "Not again." Her reflection in the microwave door lagged half a second behind her movements. She didn't look directly at it. At 12:17 a.m., someone screamed. The sound didn't travel far. It died halfway down the street, swallowed. The scream came from number 17, the house that wasn't supposed to exist. Lights came on inside it one by one, top to bottom. Then the front door opened and something stepped out. People would later argue about what they saw.
Some said it looked like a man. Others said it looked like a neighbor they recognized, until they tried to remember who. Elliot said it looked unfinished, like a person drawn from memory instead of flesh. It stood on the lawn of number 17 and looked down the street. And then it raised its head as if sniffing the air. The group chat exploded. Naomi, is that a person? Elliot, I think it's looking at houses. Mrs. Calder, do not invite it. Another message appeared. Unknown, it's counting. One by one, lights began to go out, not randomly, in order. Number 1, number 2, number 3. Each time a house went dark, the thing on the lawn took a step closer. By number 6, people were screaming inside their homes, flipping switches that no longer worked. By number 8, someone tried to run. They made it to the sidewalk, and then they stopped, as if they had reached the edge of something invisible. The thing tilted its head. The house lights flickered back on. The person turned and walked back inside. Naomi realized something before the others. The houses going dark weren't losing power. The people inside were falling asleep. The moment exhaustion finally won. Sleep was the invitation. She typed with shaking hands. We can't sleep. That's what it wants. The reply came instantly. Correct. Elliot, how long do we stay awake? There was a pause. Then, until it chooses someone to replace me. Mrs. Calder finally spoke aloud, voice breaking. It takes a watcher, she said. One house, one soul, to make sure the lane stays seen. Her lights flickered. She collapsed into a chair, eyes fluttering. Outside, the thing smiled. People tried everything, cold showers, coffee, pain, but exhaustion crept in like fog. At 3:02 a.m., number 14 went dark. At 3:19, number 12. Each time, the thing grew clearer, more solid. By 4 a.m., only 3 houses remained lit. Naomi's, Elliot's, Mrs. Calder's, flickering. Naomi stared at number 17 and realized something horrifying. The house was changing. It was beginning to look like hers. Her phone buzzed one last time. Unknown, you noticed first. Unknown, you stayed awake longest. The thing turned and started walking towards her door. Morning came suddenly. Sunlight spilled onto Willow Lane. Birds returned. Engines started. Normal sounds resumed. Neighbors stepped outside, confused, exhausted, but alive. Number 17 stood quiet, dark. Naomi's house was empty. No signs of struggle, no explanation, just one upstairs light still on. At night on Willow Lane, there is now always one house awake, and if you look closely, you can see someone standing at the window, making sure the street is never forgotten.
Willow Lane usually slept early. By 10 o'clock, most porch lights were off. Curtains were drawn halfway. Televisions murmured behind closed windows, and the street settled into its familiar pattern of small domestic sounds. The last car passing through, a dog turning in its sleep, pipes clicking softly as hot water cooled. That night, none of that happened. Instead, Willow Lane remained alert. Not awake in the usual sense, not lively, not restless, just aware. If someone had stood at the far end of the street and looked down its length, they might have noticed something subtle and deeply wrong. Every house was lit. Not brightly, not warmly, but evenly. Each light carried the same dull, pale glow, as if they were all powered by the same unseen source. There was no flicker, no variation, no shadow moving behind curtains. It looked less like a neighborhood and more like a display. Elliot Grange arrived home at 11:43 p.m. He noticed the lights before he noticed anything else. Elliot worked night shifts at the regional hospital. He was used to exhaustion, used to disorientation. He knew better than to trust his first impressions when his eyes felt dry and his thoughts lagged behind his movements. Still, something about Willow Lane made him pause at the end of the street. He left his car idling longer than necessary, headlights washing over the identical facades. Brick, siding, porches, mailboxes, all familiar, all illuminated. Elliot frowned and leaned forward, gripping the steering wheel. Normally, half the houses would be dark by now. Mrs. Calder at number 11 always turned her lights off by 9. The young couple at number 6 left their porch light on but kept the rest of the house dim. Number 14 had a flickering lamp in the upstairs bedroom that no one ever bothered fixing. Tonight, that lamp burned steady. Perfect. Elliot checked the sky. No clouds, no lightning, no storm threatening to knock power lines loose. He reached for his phone. No signal. He unlocked it anyway, muscle memory more than intention. The screen glowed uselessly, showing the time, 11:43 p.m. He waited. The seconds didn't move. Elliot exhaled slowly and shut the car off. The silence pressed in immediately. No insects, no distant traffic, not even the faint hum of electricity he usually heard when everything else went quiet. It felt like the street was holding its breath. Across Willow Lane, Naomi Keller was already awake. She hadn't slept properly in years. Insomnia had a way of teaching patience, teaching her to lie still while her mind ran in slow, looping circles. She had learned the exact point in the night when Willow Lane normally settled, when even the restless houses seemed to relax. That point never came. Naomi lay on her side, eyes open, staring at the thin strip of light beneath her bedroom door. It was brighter than it should have been. At first, she assumed she'd forgotten to turn off the hallway lamp. It wouldn't be the first time. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood, pausing to let the dizziness pass. Her body felt heavy, not tired, just weighted. As she opened her bedroom door, she realized the light wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from outside. Every room in her house was glowing. Living room, kitchen, bathroom, even the spare bedroom she never used. Naomi stood still, listening. No refrigerator hum, no ticking clock, no pipes. Her house felt hollow. She walked to the front window and pulled the curtain aside. That was when she saw them. People. Every window on Willow Lane held a figure. Some stood close to the glass, others lingered farther back, half lit. A few sat on beds or couches, posture stiff, eyes open. No one was waving, no one was speaking, no one was moving. They were just there. Naomi's mouth went dry. She raised her hand slowly, unsure why she was doing it. No one responded. She checked her phone. No signal. The time read 11:43 p.m. At number 11, Mrs. Calder was standing in her kitchen with a glass of water in her hand. She didn't remember pouring it. The tap was still dripping. She stared at the surface of the water, watching the ripples fade, waiting for her reflection to settle. This feeling, this tightness in the air, this unnatural stillness, it stirred something old in her chest, something she had spent decades pretending was gone. She whispered to the empty kitchen, her voice thin, "Please, not again." The microwave door reflected her image. It blinked, a fraction of a second too late. Mrs. Calder turned away. By midnight, Willow Lane was fully awake. Children sat upright in their beds, calm and silent, eyes fixed on corners of rooms where nothing should have been. Pets crouched low to the floor, refusing food, refusing comfort. No one felt sleepy. No one yawned. It was as if the need for rest had been gently, deliberately removed. At exactly 12 a.m., the streetlights went out. All of them, at once. Darkness should have followed. It didn't. The houses stayed lit. Light without origin, illumination without warmth. And then, finally, came the sound. Footsteps. Not outside, inside. Slow, measured, patient, moving from room to room.
After the scream faded, Willow Lane did not react. No doors opened. No lights changed. No one ran outside. It was as if the street itself had decided that movement was unnecessary. Inside number 4, Elliot Grange stood in the middle of his living room, arms hanging loosely at his sides. He was aware of his breathing in a way he usually wasn't. Each inhale shallow, each exhale measured, like his body had shifted into a quieter mode of survival. He waited for fear to arrive. It didn't. Instead, there was a strange emotional delay, a gap between understanding that something was wrong and actually feeling it. Elliot walked to the front window again. He had already looked outside at least 10 times since midnight, but each time felt like the first, like the image reset the moment he turned away. The houses across the street looked unchanged, too unchanged. The same curtains, the same light intensity, the same silhouettes standing in the same positions. No one had moved since the last time he checked. He pressed his forehead lightly against the glass. It was warm, not cold like it should have been at night. Warm like it had been exposed to sunlight all day. Elliot pulled back quickly and wiped his forehead on his sleeve, suddenly uneasy. Naomi sat on the floor with her back against the couch, knees pulled to her chest. She had stopped trying to distract herself. There was a point, sometime after the scream, where she realized that nothing she did changed anything. Movement didn't help. Stillness didn't help. Thinking didn't help. So she simply sat. Her eyes drifted around the room, landing on ordinary objects she had owned for years. A chipped mug, a crooked picture frame, a throw blanket folded too neatly. Everything looked slightly unfamiliar, not wrong, just distant, as if she were seeing her own house through memory instead of sight. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't look at it right away. When she finally did, there were no new messages, just the same ones sitting there, waiting. The unknown contact hadn't spoken again. That bothered her more than if it had. At number 11,
Mrs. Calder closed her eyes. She counted her breaths, the way she used to after the first time this had happened, the time no one on Willow Lane talked about anymore. In for 4, hold for 2, out for 6. Her hands trembled despite her effort to stay calm. The footsteps upstairs had stopped. That silence was worse than the movement, because silence meant listening. She opened her eyes and looked toward the hallway. The spare room door was no longer locked. She knew that without looking. She had locked it every night for 20 years, checked it twice, sometimes 3 times. Now the key lay on the kitchen counter, placed neatly beside the glass of water. Mrs. Calder swallowed. "It doesn't belong in there anymore," she whispered. The air in the house felt thicker, harder to pull into her lungs. By 1:10 a.m., exhaustion began to change shape. It didn't feel like tiredness, it felt like pressure, like the idea of sleep was being gently pushed toward them, tested against their resistance. Elliot noticed it first when his thoughts started looping. He kept remembering the same moment from his hospital shift, a patient asking the same question over and over, unaware they had already received the answer. At the time, Elliot had found it frustrating. Now it felt uncomfortably familiar. He realized he had been standing in the same spot for several minutes, replaying the same memory without moving. When he finally sat down, his body resisted, as if sitting were a step too close to lying down. He stayed perched on the edge of the chair instead. Naomi felt it as heaviness in her eyelids, not enough to close them, just enough to make blinking feel longer than usual. Each blink carried the faint impression of darkness lingering a fraction of a second too long. She stood abruptly, heart racing. "No," she said out loud, the sound of her own voice grounding her. She walked to the bathroom and splashed water on her face. The reflection in the mirror stared back at her. For a moment, it didn't blink when she did. Then it smiled. Not widely, not unnaturally, just enough. Naomi turned away immediately, breathing hard. The group chat came alive again, slowly, as if people were typing with hands that felt heavier than before. Number 14. "I feel like if I sit down, I won't get back up." Number 6. "My son keeps asking why it's so bright outside." Elliot. "Stay standing. Walk if you have to." The unknown contact replied. "Movement helps. Conversation helps more." Naomi. "What happens if someone falls asleep?" There was a long pause, long enough that Naomi hoped the message wouldn't be answered. Then, "The house goes dark, and it gets closer." Outside, Willow Lane looked unchanged, but something subtle had shifted. The shadows beneath the cars had deepened. The edges of houses appeared more defined, as if the street were slowly coming into focus. At the far end of the lane, a shape stood where there had been empty space before. Number 17 was not fully visible yet, only its outline, a suggestion, like a thought forming. By 1:42 a.m., the first person stopped responding in the chat. No announcement, no warning, just silence. Their house remained lit, for now. Elliot stared at the screen, waiting for 3 dots to appear. They didn't. Naomi typed their name. No response. Mrs. Calder closed her eyes and shook her head. "Don't say it. Not yet. We stop here." Deliberately.
After the first house went dark, nothing else happened. That was the problem. There was no reaction from the street, no sound of surprise, no rush of movement. The darkness did not spread outward like a shadow. It remained contained within the shape of the house, respectful of its boundaries, as if it understood the rules of the lane better than the people living on it. Inside their homes, the remaining residents waited. Waiting became the main activity of the night. Elliot stood near the center of his living room, weight shifting slowly from one foot to the other. He did not pace. Pacing implied urgency, and urgency had already drained out of the night. Instead, he rocked gently, barely perceptible, like someone standing in a moving train. His breathing matched the motion. In, out. Each breath felt deliberate, chosen, rather than automatic. That realization disturbed him. He paused, holding his breath for a moment just to see what would happen. Nothing happened. His lungs did not burn. His chest did not protest. After a few seconds, he inhaled again, not because he needed to, but because it felt appropriate. The house accepted the breath. Naomi had moved to the floor again. She sat with her back against the wall, legs stretched out in front of her, ankles crossed. The position felt familiar, comforting, like something she had done many times before, though she could not remember when or why. Her eyes drifted shut. She opened them immediately. The darkness behind her eyelids felt too complete, like a space rather than an absence. She stared at the wall instead. The paint texture appeared exaggerated, tiny ridges and bumps casting shadows that shifted subtly, even though the light in the room did not. She traced the outline of one crack with her eyes, lost it, found it again. She repeated this several times, each repetition slower than the last. At some point, she realized she had been whispering, not words, just sound, a low murmur that kept her mouth moving. She did not stop. Mrs. Calder remained seated at the kitchen table. She had not moved since the house went dark across the street. She did not need to look to know which house it was. She felt it in her chest, a small, hollow drop, like a step missed on a staircase. Her hands rested flat on the table now, fingers spread. She pressed them down firmly, grounding herself in the solid surface. The table felt warmer than it should have been, almost alive. She whispered the names of people who had lived on Willow Lane before. Some of them were still there. Some of them were not. She did not say the names of those who had stayed awake too long. Time continued to pass, or perhaps it simply continued to exist nearby, no longer aligned with the people experiencing it. Elliot checked the clock again. The numbers had changed. He accepted this without question. He did not attempt to calculate how much time had passed. That kind of thinking felt distant now, like a skill he had misplaced. Instead, he focused on smaller measurements: how long he could stand without shifting, how many breaths he could take before blinking, how long he could keep his eyes focused on one point. He failed each test gently. There was no frustration, only adjustment. The group chat stirred occasionally, like someone talking in their sleep. Messages appeared without urgency. Number 6, still here. Several minutes passed. Number 14, lights feel heavy. Elliot typed, erased, typed again. Elliot, don't lie down. The words looked unfamiliar once sent, like they belonged to someone else. The unknown contact remained silent. Its absence felt intentional, as though it were allowing the night to do its work without interference. Outside, Willow Lane held its shape. The street itself seemed unchanged, but the space between things had thickened. The air between houses felt denser. Sound did not travel as far as it should have. If a car had passed nearby, it did not. The sound would have felt distant, muffled, as if heard through water. The outline at the end of the lane sharpened again, not enough to be called a house yet, just enough to be recognized as structure. Windows suggested themselves. A roofline hinted at weight. Number 17 was no longer an idea. It was becoming patient. Naomi stood again, slowly this time. Her joints felt stiff, as though she had been still much longer than she realized. She walked to the window. She did not pull the curtain aside immediately. Instead, she stood with her forehead resting lightly against the fabric, feeling the faint warmth of light seeping through. She told herself she would count to 5. She reached 3. Then she pulled the curtain back. The figures across the street were still present, but something about them had changed. They were no longer standing at the windows. They were standing with them, as if the glass were no longer a barrier, but a shared surface. Naomi lowered the curtain again. She rested her hand against the wall and waited for her heartbeat to slow. It did not. It simply continued, steady and unconcerned. Elliot felt his eyes close for a fraction of a second longer than a blink. The darkness pressed closer this time, not pulling, inviting. He opened his eyes quickly and shook his head as if that could dislodge the feeling. The room swayed gently, then settled. He laughed once. The sound startled him. It sounded wrong in the quiet house, too sharp, too sudden. He did not laugh again. Another house went dark, then another. Not together, not rhythmically. Each darkness arrived alone, complete and final. The street did not react. The remaining lights did not flicker. They simply continued to exist, as if compensating. The group chat slowed further. Messages arrived half-finished. Number 8. Hard to... Nothing followed. Elliot stared at the incomplete sentence for a long time. Naomi typed a response and deleted it. Mrs. Calder closed her eyes. "It always feels gentle," she whispered, "right before it isn't."